On this week's Carrier App, we'll take a look back at some of the big news items from the carrier space at the recent Mobile World Congress event, as well as speak with Defense Mobile about the MVNO market. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief at RCR. Joining me today is our Managing Editor, Sean Kinney. Hey, Sean, thanks for joining us again this week. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Well, obviously, let's touch a bit on the recent Mobile World Congress event. I was not on site there, but I know you were there on site. And it seemed like a lot of the big news out of the show, at least when it comes to the carrier space, was obviously a lot of talk about 5G. And it seemed like there was, at least from my perspective, a lot of carriers, talking about the 5G strategies, at least talking partnerships with a lot of vendors out there. It seems like 2016 is going to be probably a year for a lot of movement in terms of at least initial 5G deployments, or at least 5G trials, I should say. I guess looking at it from on site there, what would your, general overview of kind of the carriers and they're talking about the 5G space? I know you talked to AT&T, for instance, there and stuff, but what was your kind of general take from what you saw there on site?
Oh yeah, 5G is definitely what was being pushed by all the domestic carriers and all the international carriers. Yeah. A lot of the announcements came around limited trials. So I think 2016 is going to be a year where obviously 5G is still pre-standardized. Maybe looking at standardization, release 16, 17, 2019 timeframe. Yeah. So you ask yourself, well, how do you trial something that's not standardized yet? Well, okay, you take a guess at what the standard is going to be, you put it in the field and see what happens, and maybe let those lessons inform that standardization process. So I think this is what you're going to see a lot of from these carriers. You mentioned AT&T. AT&T's got a license from the FCC to start conducting some trials here in Austin, Texas. One thing that surprised me out of Mobile World Congress was T-Mobile. T-Mobile going after 5G. Something we've talked about in the past, didn't really seem like core to them when you look at Verizon and AT&T and the scale that these guys operate at. You think maybe T-Mobile would be a late adopter on this kind of stuff and maybe focus on their core consumer-facing business and let some other people spend the big bucks on R&D. But and aside from T-Mobile pressing into 5G, I'll tell you that it was surprising to me that T-Mobile had not only a presence at Mobile World Congress, but I'm talking about $1 million booth in the hall right there with the big dogs.
Yeah, that's good for them. Obviously that their parent company is DT, which is based on they're in Germany, so they get obviously some European presence there. But you're right, it did sound like like you said, they have a pretty big presence there. Yeah, and it was interesting to see them be somewhat aggressive about it. I think it seemed like, at least from the show, at least from the outside looking in, that it was almost a case of carriers staking a claim at least to 5G, saying, hey, we are going to be part of 5G, so when you start talking about it, you have to at least include us in the conversation, and whether that means we're going to influence the standards down the line, like you were saying. It's almost like a point where, hey, people just had to at least announce that, hey, we know what 5G is, we're going to be part of it, don't forget us in this whole conversation, it seemed.
Right, but I will say, just in terms of physical presence, Sprint conspicuously absent, as they were at the Consumer Electronics Show last month. Verizon conspicuously absent from CES and from Mobile World Congress. To give them some credit and to be accurate here, I believe Verizon hosted a off-site dinner during Mobile World Congress, but no booth presence. They definitely had some of their higher-up guys taking part in some of the panels, but in terms of awareness, Verizon was not very present, which I just didn't really follow that. AT&T, they have broad investments around 5G and around IoT that are, not limited to the United States. This is global stuff, so we expected to see them there, and they were there. Verizon, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, 'cause it does seem like in general that Verizon and Sprint both are very much more North America, US-centric, and a lot of their operations even. So yeah, and again, AT&T is looking internationally. Their Mexican purchases last year, and they do a lot of stuff in Europe as well. So yeah, I guess it's maybe not a huge surprise, but I would agree. You would think Verizon, trying to get out there more in terms of 5G and also their IoT work, you would think that they'd be a little more aggressive at a show like this, because this is still considered the big wireless-centric show. And while it's, a lot of vendors that usually typically play there, you would still think that, Verizon would have a little bigger presence, but that's who knows what their plans are. But it does seem like 2016 is going to be a great year for at least the initial work in 5G, and it seems like Verizon's already talked about their plans for this year. AT&T's gone on board as well. Even T-Mobile, like you said, has gone on board as well. So it does seem like 2016 is going to be a big year, at least for the initial work there. And then I'm guessing, the 2017 show, next year's show for mobile commerce could be very interesting, because I think we're going to start seeing at least some of those use cases that were talked about at the show, a little more color on those use cases. And maybe, again, that trial happening in Texas with AT&T, we could see maybe some efforts or some results from that. And that could be interesting to kind of see what's happening. That might, again, propel the 5G talk, more and more, which I think is going to happen anyway. But it could be interesting to see how that kind of plays out going forward from the show.
Yeah, and you mentioned Sprint. While there wasn't a lot of Sprint news out of Mobile World Congress, they did have a pretty big announcement yesterday, I believe, that should hopefully reinforce that sort of consumer-facing retail footprint. So what are the details on that, Dan?
Yeah, basically what Sprint came out with is they pretty much extended. They announced last year a partnership with a European-based retailer, Dixon's Carphone, which runs basically retail stores that sell cellular phones. And they announced a trial last year in some markets. Apparently, it was a successful trial. So now they came out this week saying that they're going to expand that to 500 actual commercial retail stores across the country. So the plan is for Sprint to expand its retail presence. That's something they talked about a lot last year. I know you were covering quite a bit the Sprint Radio Shack deal from last year, where Sprint bought into basically 1,400 Radio Shack stores to rebrand those as Sprint stores. Again, part of Sprint's big push to kind of expand the retail presence, which they felt was perhaps a limiting factor for their growth. Some might say it's some other issues, but at least that's one thing they want to try to push out more, was their retail presence. And so now they got a new deal to open up 500 more stores. Again, it does seem like that the shopping experience is evolving from what it was perhaps a couple of years ago, when retail was a big part of it. So I guess I question the importance of these retail expansions. Perhaps, maybe I'm not the usual consumer out there who's going out there looking at stores all the time to go purchase my cellular phone. So we'll see how that plays out. I mean, I'm not sure what your view is on general, I guess, the move towards a greater retail presence for Sprint.
It was confusing to me. Maybe I'm not a typical consumer, because when I get a new phone, I order it online and get it shipped to my house or my office. But you mentioned the Radio Shack expansion, which they did last year. To put that in perspective, Radio Shack was going through some contraction. They were going to close a bunch of stores. Sprint came in, took some of that inventory, rebranded them as Sprint stores. Did that work? Did they make money off of that? Did the investment bear fruit? I know it's been maybe 2 quarters since that sort of happened.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, my view was, and there's Radio Shack stores near me, and those Radio Shack stores, I've been into them on a few occasions. I needed to, buy some random cable couplers for various stupid things. And every time I've gone to a Radio Shack store in the past, I was the only person in there. And now going by those stores, a lot of them have closed down. The ones that are still open have been rebranded as Sprint stores. And I've driven by those stores, and every time I go by those stores, I don't see any cars in front of those stores. I don't see a lot of traffic there. So, and again, we've seen Sprint's numbers over the past year, or the past 3 quarters even. And, they've seen some progress in terms of postpaid net adds, but their prepaid has suffered. So I think in general, their growth has been pretty flat. So it's hard to say, and they don't really break out what they've seen. I mean, they've talked positively about those Radio Shack rebrandings, and obviously that's kind of what you have to do as your management there, because that's your ideas. But I would question how well those have done for them. But again, that it does seem like an odd move for them to throw money at retail right now, because it does seem like you're saying, you don't buy anything in retail stores for the most part. I mean, you shop it online. I think a lot of consumers are moving that way. So it's interesting. But I guess, again, looking at the retail presence too, I know Sprint also came out recently reintroducing basically, I guess, their 2-year contract as well for consumers. So kind of, I guess, re-expanding the options for customers. Earlier this year, they kind of did away with the 2-year contracts, which were part of the subsidized phone programs, which were, the history of wireless. And a lot of carriers last year did the same thing. But now recently Sprint has come back by re-offering, I guess, Sprint or customers the ability to, to pick up a phone at a discounted price tied to a 2-year service contract. Again, that's, I guess, offering more options is always a better way to do it. Perhaps it's a little more confusing for the customer, but I've always liked that option for customers. I know a lot of people, my family members, were used to buying a phone that way. I mean, getting a deal on an iPhone for $200, signing a contract, and that was the way you did it. What's your general view on kind of, I guess, that movement to bringing back the contract plans? That was kind of an interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that if you look at it from the perspective of who does a 2-year contract maybe appeal to, probably the same person that wants to sign it in a retail shop. So, so if that's the strategy, I can see the cohesion in it. My only other kind of comment on the retail shops, and you can interpret this how you will, the retail experience is a big part of the SoftBank brand. They do really innovative things in their retail locations, up to and including having robots that provide customer service in there. So if maybe the goal is to borrow sort of that aspect of SoftBank's business and apply it to the Sprint company and the Sprint model, I can see them going in that direction. But there again, I don't know if I agree with the value of that, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're right. If they can, I guess, bring that over, and maybe I should go into one of these stores and see what they're actually doing in person. I mean, the last time I went to a retail location for wireless wireless store, I came away very disappointed. I mean, I've gone to wireless stores a lot in the past, and for me, it's become a last resort type of thing at this point. I know these, the different training aspects to the employees there. They're trying to bring them up to speed, but in general, it's very hit and miss when it comes to who you're going to get to help you and how much help they can actually provide. And then, I always seem to get hit with extra little fees whenever I go to a store. There's always an activation fee or something that you don't get when you do it online as opposed to in the store. And there's always those little things that seem to kind of degrade the in-store experience. But again, hey, if they've got a robot helping me, that's kind of cool. Maybe I would go in for talking to a robot. I mean, hey, eventually they're going to be our overlords anyway. We might as well get used to them and be used to interacting with them. So perhaps that's a step in the right direction at some point. So I don't know. That's just my view of that experience there. But we'll see what Sprint does. I don't know.
Yeah, they're making moves. They're not standing still. That's for sure.
You give them credit for that. I mean, that's one thing, at least from a news perspective too. We always get lots of good news from Sprint. So that was always good. So yeah. So again, great. It seemed like Mobile Congress last week had a lot of great 5G talk. Always good to get some Sprint news as well in there. So again, another good week for the carrier space. And then I guess now transitioning to our featured interview for the week. I had a chance recently to speak with Defense Mobile, which is an MVNO out there. Working in the very crowded MVNO domestic space. One of their key, I guess, differentiators in the market is that they're kind of targeting the military. So basically, people who are in the military looking to sign up for service, they're kind of focused more on what they need, their needs for the military families out there. And so I had a chance to speak with their CEO about kind of what their market is out there and kind of how they are performing in the market. So let's take a look at the interview now. Well, thanks for joining us this week. Today we are joined by Anthony Montoya, who's the CEO of Defense Mobile, to talk a bit about what they're doing in the space, but also an overview kind of the MVNO space as well. So Anthony, thanks so much for joining us this week. We appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for your time, Dan. I appreciate it as well.
Great. Well, maybe start off with, again, maybe a little overview of Defense Mobile. I mean, you guys, I think in the name alone kind of sets up what you guys do, but maybe provide some insight there on what you guys are doing in the market there.
Yeah, so we're a nationwide mobile service offered exclusively to the veteran active duty segment, with their members and their families. Mm-hmm. We're the only wireless provider exclusively focused on the segment of the military community, and our overall mission is to kind of connect and improve the lives of veterans, military service members and their families. And part of our message also is, and part of our business case is that we give back 10% of our profits to veterans' families and some of their and not-for-profits and that support them. So it's a great mission. I'm proud to be part of it, and it's something great to be passionate about.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously that 10% part of it, I mean, I know the MVNO space in general, it's a pretty slim margin business as it is. So for you guys to give up 10%, that's pretty significant. It might not sound like a lot to a lot of people, but in a business that's not a lot of margin there, that's giving up something there.
Absolutely, but we're not only a wireless services MVNO. We have also some value-added services that we look at. We have an app that we call Millisource, and Millisource app also gives you all the access to all the federal state benefits that you have access to as a veteran or as an active duty member, retail discounts, those kinds of things. And so there are also some revenue streams that come along with some of our value-added services as well. So we're not just a plain vanilla MVNO, I'll say, in a lot of different ways, both from what we offer, and we're just not a standalone wireless provider. We're really more of a full service provider targeted and focused on the veteran community. That
sounds good. No, I guess can you provide a little more insight, I guess, in your operational structure, kind of your business plan. I mean, how do you guys come to this, idea of, hey, we'll do an MVNO on this. We have a business plan to make this work. Provide some insight, I guess, on how that all operates and distribution models, things like that too.
Yeah, so stepping back a little bit, I joined the company now this past summer.
Okay.
I bring a a wealth of experience. Just to give you a quick snapshot of my background, I started in the cable television industry, 100 years ago. And, as part of the original team, people have forgotten that Sprint PCS was started by a bunch of cable operators. Mm-hmm. I was part of that team that came over, started Sprint. So great to be kind of an entrepreneur in a very well-funded startup, and great to learn the wireless business and, from the bottoms up and top down, and the way we were kind of building Sprint PCS. Mm-hmm. I spent a number of years there. I left and started an MVNO called Movida that was focused on the Hispanic market. Mm-hmm. Very well with that one. And then I'm also on the background. I'm also a 20-year military veteran and a Desert Storm veteran as well. So I spent a number of years, retired as a senior field grade officer, and had a great experience there as well. So kind of taking all that together, was what kind of made me both interested in this opportunity and very passionate about this opportunity. So stepping back a little bit, it was originally founded by a couple of brothers, Drew and Brendan Riley. Mm-hmm. They saw the need for this sort of a focused offer to the veteran and active military and families segment, and built a business plan, raised some capital, and I think their mission was always to get it to a point where they needed to bring in the right talent and the right person that had wireless and military experience and take it to the next level. So when they built out the platform, a lot of it is very similar to what you have in a lot of MVNO cases, outsourced back offices. Mm-hmm. We built our own. We built a lot of what we're not a total, relying on everybody else and every other product out there, but we built most of our operating platform that ties a lot of the vendors together. So we've got a strong tie to who our customers are, the ability to know that they are a veteran, so we can give them exclusive service as a veteran or as an active duty member. Those kinds of things that don't come standard with a normal MVNO operation.
Got it.
A lot of it was built on our own, and pulling in some of the vendors as well to augment what we've built as well.
Makes sense. And obviously, again, the MVNO space, as you know, you have a lot of history in the telecom space and the wireless space and the MVNO space. It is a difficult type of environment out there. I know there's a lot of MVNOs we've been covering here for years and years. A lot of big names came and went. A lot of smaller companies have kind of come and gone. It does seem like, though, to really survive, you do have to find kind of that niche. And it seems like you guys, obviously with this one here, this is a pretty significant, and I wouldn't really call it a niche, it's a pretty significant audience out there. I guess, how do you approach, making sure that you guys do get your name out and kind of are in front of the military community out there to make sure that they know you guys are out there as part of an option, at least?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of different ways. The first, from a distribution perspective, we did a trial in all the military and some of the top military installations recently. We're expanding to all the other in this quarter to the other military installations. So that's kind of the first piece of real estate you have to own if you're going to have a product focused on that segment, being in the military installations. So we're moving forward in that direction. We're also getting ready to announce a large national retailer that we should be announcing before too long. So from a retail perspective, building that kind of ecosystem around those military installations, because that's where you have a significant amount of the population. So that's from a distribution perspective. Now let's take it to an affinity perspective. A lot of the other MVNOs out there really play the cheap, low-cost provider, the very low budget, the very, you can only pay online. You can't call our customer service, line. We're building a totally different model. We're building a model that is truly an affinity-based model. So not only does it help us be successful, that we're not in the noise with all the other kind of the low-cost carriers and the budget carriers, but we're focusing on what are we giving back to the community? What are we giving? We're bringing things specifically that are focused on the military segment, the veteran segment. So that gives us an ability to focus. The carriers like it because it's a space they're not looking at. They are, but one of the terms I say is, we live this 24/7, 365. The carriers do their Veterans Day promotions, their 4th of July promotions. We live this every day, and we have a number of military retirees on our staff. Our call center is 100% staffed here in the United States by veterans. Mm-hmm. So again, we're living it every day. We know what they're looking for. We know what they want. We know what they need, and we're not going after the real value seeker in the mobile space, which is what a lot of the other MVNOs do. Have suffered from very low margins.
Yeah, that's a good point. It does seem like, the MVNO markets, a lot of those guys have come out and they have kind of targeted, whether it's the prepaid space or going after the Crickets of the world or the Metro PCSs of the world. And, that might have been okay 10 years ago when those guys weren't too big, but now that those guys are owned by really large guys, That's a cutthroat environment right there to try to get involved with playing with those big operators like that.
It absolutely is. But they'll do a great Veterans Day promotion, but the other 364 days, what are you doing for me kind of thing. So I think we augment the carriers very well as well. So I think that's one of the other, that's a value proposition we bring to the carriers. We help them address a focus or a segment that they're not necessarily focused on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what kind of support are you getting from the operators? I know people can check out your website and see your coverage map. Obviously, you guys have some agreements with some large operators out there. Does it seem like that the operators have been, again, pretty receptive to this? Because the MVNO space has been, as we were just saying, it has been an up and down kind of market, and maybe some operators were burned by these at some point as well. And sometimes you've had to absorb some of their MVNOs at other times too. Are you seeing that the established operators are still fairly open to kind of this MVNO space at this point?
They absolutely are, for a couple of different reasons. They like us a lot because they've got a lot of people beating on their doors and saying, "Hey, we want to start an MVNO. We've got this great concept."
Yeah.
And they're very particular about who they let in that door and who they negotiate with and who they do business with. And again, what they're trying to avoid is something that's going to cannibalize their efforts, cannibalize their market. And that's what I think they like about Defense Mobile is we're not going to cannibalize it because they're not actively going after this segment. They love the military segment, don't get me wrong. Sure. And they do sell their services in some of the military bases when they can, but it's not their primary focus, their segment. So they see us as an augment to their segment. Now that's it as well. I remember when I was with Movida, one of the values that you have with all of the MVNOs is we're bringing free subscribers to the carriers. And they love that we're spreading the acquisition costs. We put them on their network, so they love that. And we're also doing that where we're not battling with them and battling for their eyes or their dollars and competing against them to take customers away from them. So that's the first part about it. The other piece about it is, if you were at CES this few weeks ago, definitely see the model changing. And AT&T first announced that they were going to be pushing their non-contract, and people are buying phones. It started with the Apple phone being able to be purchased on an installment basis. Yep. So you're finding out that even if you look at the handset manufacturers, the OEMs are now building phones that are a super SKU that you can take. You buy the phone, you own the phone, and you can take it to any carrier you want. Yeah. So in that environment as well, there's even more value in somebody like Defense Mobile that has a very specific focus that brings customers that they're not necessarily going to bring to the table. So, and again, we're doing it 365 days a year. So that's one of the things that where we bring some expertise that they just don't have.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that, I guess, the device space, because it does seem like the device makers out there, they've been years trying to kind of, streamline their SKUs out there and not have as many devices. And you're right, the market is changing now to where it is, customers can pretty much take their device almost anywhere, pop it into a SIM card or whatever it is. Has that environment, obviously it's helped you guys quite a bit, but are you finding that the device makers out there, are you working with them directly? Are you just kind of working with them as a, through another partner? Or what's kind of your relationship with the device makers out there?
Yeah, so we are working directly with the device makers. There are some brands that have a very strong affinity to the military segment, and we sell those on our website and also on some of our distribution channels. So that's the first piece of it. The other thing the other thing that's good about this model when it comes to an MVNO's business perspective is you're not having to have a huge subsidy out there to be able to compete in the marketplace. Yeah. So now when all the carriers are offering kind of a buy this handset, put it on our network, and if you don't put it on that network, then you get your handset, you do what you want with it. So the economics start becoming a little bit more attractive for the MVNOs as well. So our relationship with the OEMs is we work directly with them, and then basically we have a logistics provider that we use as well, and we do our purchases. They go to the logistics provider, and then they just do our direct fulfillment to our customers, so our customers are our retailers. So it's a pretty smooth operation. We don't have a lot of overhead in the logistics and shipping and management side of it, but we are able to work directly with some of the OEMs now that we're not a big carrier. Mm-hmm. But they see us as a customer just as well because we can buy directly from them now. Where in the past, that's the other thing that the OEMs are doing. You can buy directly from them as opposed to having to go through an aggregator or a logistics provider.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know at least in the industry itself, that move away from handset subsidies, it was a pretty big change for the operators because that was kind of the way they locked customers in for 2 years. That was a big part of the business model. Yes. But you're right, this kind of move away to this payment plan, while perhaps, kind of lets them move away from having to subsidize things. It also does seem like it has opened up the opportunities for MVNOs to kind of be a little more competitive out there, because that's kind of been the model for MVNOs for a long time. They never really wanted to provide a huge subsidy. So oftentimes, if you went to an MVNO, you probably paid a little bit more for the device up front, just because you weren't getting that subsidy, or you're getting a used device or a refurb or something like that. That's right. Yeah. Now it seems like, since everybody's doing this, you guys can just come in there, same price point for the most part, and you look the same. I mean, now it's just a matter of pricing on a service plan, which, that's whether you want to compete or not is a whole different story. But if you can offer something extra, some sort of service, or really focus on a customer base, you're able to do it at a pretty reasonable cost overhead for you guys, really.
Yeah. Very, very MVNO friendly in this environment. Absolutely. So that's one of the things that we like about that model as well. The other thing too, I think the beauty of it is there's a strong affinity in the military segment. So those that are veterans and those that are in the military, it's a brotherhood. It really is. And so if somebody is on a contract with one of the other carriers and says, hey, Defense Mobile, they give back 10%, they employ veterans. I'm one of these people. I love the fact that this is what they do for the segment. So when you have that sort of environment and I say, all right, I'm on carrier A and I've got this phone that I own. I like this rate plan. I like what they do. I can easily switch over and because it's something that I'm very passionate about. So that's one of the other things that I think in this new MVNO model, or in this new carrier and OEM model, that I think is very very good for MVNOs. And I think the timing is perfect for us in that model changing right now.
Yeah. I guess all those guys who came out early, the Disneys and the ESPNs of the world, they just came out a little too soon. If they would have waited, they would have had a much better chance.
In the mobiles of the world, we were back in CDMA when transshipment was a huge issue, and so we're those days are long gone.
Yeah, no, you're right. It was definitely a difficult time back then, but you're right. Now it does seem like everything's much more open for you guys, and you're able to compete much on a more level playing field. So that sounds good. Well, I know you touched a bit on the distribution part of it, because it does seem like, I guess, on the marketing side as well. I mean, obviously you want to be around all the military bases, a lot of military communities out there. But it does seem like, the space is so competitive from a macro level. I mean, all the big carriers are out there, all their prepaid partners are out there. I mean, they're spending, untold billions of dollars on advertising and doing things. I guess for you guys, I mean, as you look at that and trying to compete against that, I mean, obviously you can't compete on a dollar for dollar basis on that. You guys have to be very smart with what you guys do in terms of marketing and things like that. How do you approach that aspect and that challenge of being able to, be perhaps a small player in this, but still get your name out there?
Yeah, and the one word answer is focus.
Okay.
So let me separate that into kind of two different subsegments of that.
Okay.
The first one is, if you take a look at the demographics of the United States and where the military lives, and you have a significant military population, you can narrow it down to some very specific markets. And those are the markets that, naturally fall around a lot of the military installations. So going into those markets and building, kind of your cornerstone is going to be that military installation where you offer your service, but then building out an ecosystem around that with third-party retailers that says, because you've got a high propensity of retirees and active duty in that market. So really a market focus with using those, by using those military installations is kind of your cornerstone. And then we also have we call them brand ambassadors, but it's your field sales team. Those are the ones that are out in the field working with those doors, working with the various spouse organizations on post, on base, working with our retailers out there that, to find the right ones that we're in a high concentration area. So that's the first piece of it from a real physical bricks and mortar distribution perspective. The second one is e-commerce, which we've done very well in e-commerce. And for e-commerce to be successful, you have to have some very strong affinity relationships. Right now, we've got a relationship with military.com, with the VFW, and with the American Legion. So anybody that signs up through any of those organizations gets a discount on our service as well. So a very strong e-commerce play. And then going into 2016, we're also looking at a number of other strong affinity relationships. A lot of them out there, but we're talking to them. And I think that's going to be one of the things also that's going to bring us a lot of success. So really kind of a two-tiered approach, building out your structure around those bricks and mortar and around those military facilities, and then augmenting it with some really strong affinity relationships with the strong players in the space.
Very interesting. I guess now, maybe looking ahead a little bit, I mean, do you see, what is maybe some of the challenges you guys see perhaps for yourself to kind of gain some momentum on this? I mean, do you see anything out there that's really maybe, a hiccup for you guys, or something that might be in the way for you guys to really push this? I mean, does it seem like everything's kind of clear for you guys, or what's your view, I guess, looking ahead the next 6 to 12 months for your own development of the company?
Our biggest challenge, quite frankly, is just our brand equity in the market, because we just don't have that brand strength. We're new in the market. People are hearing about us. We're doing a lot of advertising, a lot of online advertising, a lot of media spend in that space, but we just don't have that brand recognition yet that we need. We're trying to get it as we build more of our affinity relationships out, that people will start seeing it, affiliated with the veteran, the VFW, with American Legion. They start seeing our brand out there in other places as well. So that's probably been our biggest impediment to success so far. But as we grow, you grow the brands as well, and you start, and from there you start, getting more brand recognition and more people coming to your website, buying your product, and more comfortable with who you are and what you're about. Because it's more than just brand; it's also what are the services we offer, what networks are we on, those kinds of things. Yeah,
and you guys, it doesn't seem like you're an organization that needs to have 5 million customers or 10 million customers to actually make it here. I mean, I'm sure you guys can, have obviously overhead is what it is, but you're an organization. It's not like, oh my God, we have to hit these sales numbers or we're going to be in trouble. It's like you're able, it seems like able to kind of stably or grow the organization at a reasonable rate, and not expect to have this huge return initially on your investment there.
Well, yes and no, but it's
I mean, you want 10 million customers. I'm sure that's true, but
and we'd love to get 1 million customers. It's it's all about the business. It's all about what but more so providing the right services and at the right cost and the right price point to our base. But again, and it's big with our give back. We're very committed to that, and we've given already this year, or 2015. I thought we already went to 2016, but we already gave to a number of organizations 2015 as well, and so we've done very well in sticking to our mission in that regard.
That sounds good. Well, Anthony, it's obviously a great move here. I mean, we built a lot of MVNOs over the past, and it's kind of neat to see one like yourselves kind of really focus on a market that's probably been a little bit underserved, probably at least focus wise. So it's good. It's great to see you guys doing that. And again, best of luck for what you guys have been doing.
And a little bit unfortunate, it's a growing market. I say a little bit unfortunate. I'm a veteran as well, but you never like to see that segment growing. But it's the reality of the world today. It's a growing segment as well.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. But again, Anthony, we definitely appreciate the great insight on this today. And again, best of luck to what you guys are doing. And hopefully we can catch up soon, kind of get an update on how it's progressing for you guys. But again, we definitely appreciate the time and insight today.
Absolutely. We'd love to circle back as we continue to make progress in 2016. So, our doors are open for conversations. Absolutely.
That sounds great. Well, thanks again.
Thank you for your time, Dan. I appreciate it.
Well, that'll do it for this week's Carrier Wrap. Thanks for watching this week's episode, and make sure to check us out again next week.